I've got a GameCube in a bag and it's in bits. Doubt if it's working. I've got a new shell and I've got to tell you it's in an obscene colour. But it's not just that, hold on to your hat because we're going to install a flippy drive from Team off Broadway right now. Mark fixes stuff. When I was younger, I told myself that when I grew up, I'd play video games all the time. Then I grew up, well, allegedly anyway, and the pressures of adulting made me tired. My love for video games didn't diminish though. No, it was as strong as ever. The spirit was willing, but the flesh was oh so weak. When standard energy drinks wore off, I felt more tired than I did in the first place. A while back, I discovered Holy. It's a healthy alternative to the sugary taurine-laden stuff that I was guzzling and provides better focus whilst also being boosted with various nootropics and vitamins B, C and D. The caffeine is slow release, meaning the effects are subtle and long-lasting throughout the day, and even though it's sugar-free, it comes in a variety of really tasty flavours. My personal favourite is pineapple, but I've yet to find a flavour I don't like. To cut a long story short, if you're ensnared in a sugar trap like I was, why don't you give Holy a try? There's a link in the description box below for £5 off your first order. Give it a shake and let me know if you like it as much as I do. With all that silliness aside, it's time to look and see what we've actually got inside this bag. And it's a bit of a mess. Lots of parts of a Nintendo GameCube. This was given to me by Wayne Robbins, who you might know as Retro Robbins on the YouTubes. Go and find his channel and drop him a sub, he's a good lad. We can see that the side of the GameCube case is broken, but the other side is absolutely smashed in. Yeah, there's no coming back from that really. We can also see some kind of decals all over the shell. I think these are from some kind of gaming magazine, or they could be early Robot Wars decals. On the back handle we seem to have a composite cable which has been cable tied to the handle. Cables cable tied to a handle. Brill. Well, we'll use that anyway. Because I've been packing away, I don't have any other AV cables for the GameCube, so I'm expecting that to look pretty dog exhaust, but we'll see how we get on. Inside this bag we've got what looks like the screws. Yep, that's the screws. Now a pound to a pinch of pony droppings, they're not all there, but if they are, winner winner, chicken dinner. Or winner winner turnip dinner if you're a vegetarian or vegan. Well, odds are they're not there, but we'll have a go. Moving swiftly on to the next thing in the bag, we've got the back panel. And from the back panel we can see that this is the GameCube model with the digital AV output, the more sought after DOL001 model. I'm going to pop everything in the top shell as a bit of a tray. Some inner shielding which has obviously got quite damp as it's speckled with rust. What looks like a fan filter, I didn't actually know they were removable on the GameCube, but hey, you live and you learn. Oops, in the tray. Or not. Next out of the bag is the GameCube's disk drive. Although it looks a bit Rogered to be frank. Although what Frank and Roger have got to do with it and why they're doing that, I have no idea. Anyway, we'll polish it up. The drive, not Frank. Who is this Frank character? And still attached to the lower part of the shell we find the motherboard. Can you hear me, mother? And finally we finish unloading our sack and find the front panel of the GameCube. And this is where it becomes apparent what's happened on someone's previous exploration. The ribbon cable has been torn off of the front panel, which would obviously render the GameCube pretty useless because you couldn't use your controllers. I bet when that fell off they went, "Oh bother, you rotter," and poop. Anyway, before I go to the trouble of fixing this up, let's see if the actual board itself boots and works. If it doesn't, I've got another GameCube for the flippy drive. I'm going to have to use this composite cable because unfortunately I've packed everything else away. I've got a really nice RGB SCART cable for GameCube, but Lord only knows where it is. I don't. What a fantastic double chin I've really developed over the years. Let's plug this baddie in and see if it works. I think it will, they usually do, to be honest. Really must keep this safe though, because if I lose it we're in a spot of doo-doo, shall we say. So this is my known working GameCube power supply. It works on my PicoBoot modded console. You can actually run the GameCube for a fair amount of time without the fan blowing across the heatsink. Which is a good job because I'm going to do it anyway. Switching to the appropriate output on the cheap 4.3 LCD TV. We get nothing. And then I realise I've pressed the wrong button as usual. And hooray! We've actually got output from the board. What a brilliant start. We might actually have a really good success story out of this, well, bag of bits. The flippy drive should allow us to keep our original GameCube disk drive enabled. I know that this disk drive looks a bit scruffy, but I'm really hoping it will work. If we could get a complete working GameCube from a bag of bits, why that would be the dog's danglies. Let's turn the GameCube round so the front of the machine's at least facing us. I really like how the disk drive actually fits into a connector on the board. None of those flipping, frustrating, folding flexible cables here. They're so fiddly. This is actually where our flippy drive will be installed later, so pay attention. You really don't have to push very hard to get the drive into the correct position. I think that's fine, but just to check from the front, shows it's nice and flush. Time to reach for my balls. My monkey balls. Sorry, that was a bit of a stretch, that one. Let's power on the console and see if our disc actually boots. I'm not actually sure if the console can boot in this partially assembled state. And of course it doesn't boot because there's no lid, therefore the lid can't be shut. Holding the lid switch and our disc spins up. That's a good sign, it means that the laser can detect that there's media present. But will the game actually boot? And the answer is no. The time and date settings for the console have been lost because the battery that stores them is on the front panel along with the controller ports. So after all that, we're going to have to repair the front panel ribbon cable anyway, just to see if our disk drive works. Oh well, we were going to do it anyway, and I don't think it will be too bad. We can use the PCB holder for this. It's not really ideal for the shape of the front panel, but it's better than nothing. As you can see, the machine is really dirty, so I'm going to do my best to clean up the soldering site. First we're going to use some liquid flux. This is the no clean variety, although it's usually best to clean it off anyway. Next I'm going to reflow the existing solder on the pads. By applying the fresh flux and then reheating all the solder, it makes it much more likely to be removed when we use the desoldering wick. Desoldering wick is really handy. It's something that everybody should have in their soldering toolkit. Now I'm not looking to make these pads perfectly flat, just flat enough that we don't have any problems during soldering. Because let's be honest, these don't look very straight, do they? So I think the first thing that we need to do is try and straighten these out a bit. I'm going to use a pair of tweezers. Now I'm not looking for them to be perfect, just enough that they lay in some kind of uniform direction so that I can solder them onto the pads. This is going to be really fiddly, so we're going to tack the two outermost wires to the pads and then do the ones in the middle afterwards. It's not going to win any beauty contests, so be prepared. Tinning the pads first will help us to get our first two wires in position. And I've made double certain that I've got the wire the right way up. These contacts are actually teeny weeny tiny, so I'll settle for functional over foobar any day of the week. I think that's going to do for that side. Now I'll line up the other contact and tack that into position. Because of the angle of the camera, it looks like this cable's on a slight angle, but when you look at the board from above, it's actually in the correct position. Straightening the wires so that we can just go along and tack them all, I managed to bridge some of the contacts. Oh, just got away with it. I've reflowed the joints so they look slightly nicer, but now I'm picking out any solder balls that might be stuck between the contacts. I'm using the tip of a very sharp scalpel for this. It's not too bad. I mean, it's hideous, but it's not too bad. I am a little worried that it has no strain relief though. Regardless, let's go ahead and see if we can test the front panel. By plugging in a controller, we should at least be able to get past the set your language part of the console boot up, and then test our disk drive. I'm not too nervous about turning the console on because I think I've made a fairly good job of replacing the cable. Once our pile of bits machine has booted up, it's time to test the controller. And I'm happy to report that everything seems to be working. All buttons check out. Hooray! And now we can finally test our DVD drive, for it is a DVD drive. GameCube discs were literally just smaller DVDs. Our game disc should be recognised now, if the DVD drive is working. And I'm happy to say it does work. Let's see if it will actually boot the game. Detecting the disc is one thing, but streaming the movies smoothly is another. Bear in mind I haven't cleaned any of this console. That might actually come in a later video. That looks okay, but it's not really demanding on the amount of data being passed along the bus. I can't actually play the audio off of Super Monkey Ball because I'll get a copyright strike. But that looks pretty good, and I can tell you it sounds spot on. Hence my boogie woogie jiggle. Dance along at home if you know it. Okay, that's good enough for me. Let's get this sorted. In an attempt to add some strain relief to the cable that we soldered, I've used a UV curing glue. I tried this for ages, but I have to say it wasn't tremendously effective in the long run. Until I got the parts of this console all out underneath the lights, I didn't realise how grim it was. I think there might need to be a second part of this video where I clean it up. Looking over the screws from the bag, it does indeed look like everything's there. Although the earth connectors that go on the back of the controller panel are looking a bit battered, as is the rest of the console. In fact, I didn't realise how grotty it was until I got it underneath the lights. Let's make a bit of space here so that we can get our new shell out of the box. Now I know I'm predictable, I always pick purple or smoked grey, but today we've gone for something else. An acid neon yellow GameCube case, and the reason I chose this colour was because it was on sale for £12 delivered to the UK on AliExpress. And one of those freak sales that just pops up on your feed. And for £12, I'd be a mug not to buy it. And I don't really hate it actually. In fact, on camera it doesn't do it justice. It's almost, what's the word? Fluorescent. No, it's not almost fluorescent, it is literally fluorescent. I think if I hit this with some UV light it would glow. This shell has a back panel for either of the GameCube models. That's the one with the digital output on the back panel, the earlier model, or the later model which had the digital port removed. The later model with just one port. There are two springs provided. These are for applying tension to the memory card slot covers, which are here. They seem quite good quality actually. I'm quite impressed. For £12 I don't think you can go wrong. Apart from the obvious blindness we're all going to suffer. Well, that's all the fiddly bits, and it's just the base. And all the covers look great on that as well. You know, I really don't have any complaints with this product, and I bought it, so I'm not trying to shill it to you. Now we've got our case out, we can take our GameCube to bits. I'll put my Super Monkey Balls on the shelf, safe for if I want to play later, and then we'll pull off the drive. Most of this console is disassembled already, so it's going to be fairly easy to take it apart. I really do think this might be a multi-part project. So today we're going to take it all apart, fit it in the case, and then we might take it apart for some more improvements in a later video. But we'll end up with a working machine at the end. To take the mainboard out, we have to remove 6 screws through the heatsink. This is fairly easy, they're machine threaded and come out without complaint. Because I've had to pack away most of my workshop, I am feeling a bit hamstrung. I'd really like to stick this all through the ultrasonic cleaner, but it's not here. I'll stop moaning now. Any dust that's left behind we can get at a later date. The important thing is that today we're going to take it all apart, install our flippy drive, pop it in the new case and make sure it all fits back together. I've also got this pipe dream kicking around in my head that I might like to 3D print a multicoloured custom jewel, rather than use the one that's in the box. There's 4 more screws here which go through into the case themselves. These are what we call self-tapping screws, meaning they cut into plastic. I might not be putting all this shielding back, so yeah, keep an eye on me to keep me honest. This board underneath is actually the power supply. It's got another one of those connectors that mates with the board above it. No real reason to take that out of this piece of shielding. I will take this shielding out and put it aside, although I'm not sure how useful it will be to put into our new console case. Likewise with this piece. These supports are important, however. If you're going to screw something like a Game Boy adapter on the bottom, you need these in place so that you can screw into them. Or you're screwed. There's 3 of them, and they all seem to have different stamp numbers, but I suspect they're interchangeable. I'm not sure though, so your mileage might vary. Shall we try and give this a bit of a clean? I'm not sure how much success we'll have with this, it's really pitted. I don't have the ultrasonic cleaner, but I do have some metal polish, and we could try that. Although I'm not sure. Let's give it a go though. I'm going to lay this cloth down to protect the workbench. This is traditionally a very messy job. Like most metal polishes, this is essentially a kind of a grinding paste. Taking our cloth, we rub it into the metal. And it does have some effect, but not really the effect that I want, which is instant and easy. In fact, it starts taking such a large amount of hard work that I get my Jank Life mini tool out. And that does have a bit more of an effect, but it's still not pretty. For a long time now, I've been wondering about doing some electroplating at home. Now I'm moving from here, so I've got no hope of doing it here, but maybe one day if I get a space where I could set that up, would that be something you'd be interested in seeing? I think it might work in cases like this. The polish really hasn't worked, but what has happened is I've made a massive mess of the entire workbench. It does look better though, just not good. And this looks pretty bad too. Sorry Jank Life. And solder holder, and solder, and wall. What a waste of 2 hours. Anyway, let's crack on. A bit of suction always cheers me up. I really hope you're enjoying this video. If you are, perhaps you'd consider becoming a patron of the channel at patreon.com/MarkFixesStuff. Okay, let's fit that power supply. Really, I just want to get it all together and see if it works. You'll notice I've already cut the screw threads here. That's because I put this in first without putting that support which goes underneath it. So I took it out and then refilmed it. I didn't want to waste your time. Yeah, it's a bit dusty. It's a bit shameful. If you lived in this GameCube and your mum came round for tea, you'd be a bit shamefaced. Or maybe you wouldn't, I don't know, I don't like to judge you. Terry and Dave, however, do like to judge, and they do like to watch me work, whilst doing absolutely no bloody work themselves. Left a bit, right a bit, golden shot. I'm going to go as quickly as possible now, so we'll just pop the lower shielding in. I think that's okay. Again, this is part 2 because I got this far before after the first foobar with the power supply. Po body's perfect. I do want to clear these ports out before I put it into the machine though, because they're likely full of muck and stuff, so we'll brush the board down and preemptively pull on these flaps. They actually come out really easily. Nice. I might keep those as spares even though they're quite yellow. They quite literally just clip in. And by doing it this way, it's given me a good insight on how to fit the new ones. I got a raft of complaints when I last used my WD-40 contact cleaner, but I don't care. At this point, I just want it clean enough so that it can work effectively. I do feel like finding the rust and all the extra dirt inside the machine has kind of taken the wind out of my sails a bit on this project. It's probably just me overthinking it as usual. The rear ports get the same treatment. Some WD-40 contact cleaner and a massive thrusting with the, well, apparently anti-static brush. After the brush, I used one of my eco-friendly bamboo cotton sticks, and yeah, it was really mucky. That's just one port. Disgusting, but let's put our main board back in. We have to make sure that the back corner is pressed down on that connector, otherwise nothing will work. You know when it's in though. There's a kind of a clickety bump bump boom. Okay, some sped up footage of the screws now. Let's go. Yep, I'm really this fast in real life. Not even kidding. Ask my wife. And this is the part where we can install our flippy drive. The flippy drive is a solderless ODE or optical drive emulator for the GameCube. This was sent by Team Off Broadway, and I really thank them for supporting the channel. An ODE is something that you replace the optical disc drive in your console with. You could just use a Pi Pico, but the advantage with the flippy drive is that you can keep your existing optical disc drive working as well, giving you access to all your optical media and legacy games, as well as being able to run games from an SD card. Let's have a moment's silence while I realise I can't actually open this bag. Oh, thank goodness. Full disclosure, I've opened this bag before and I've actually managed to lose one of the little tiny screws, which is annoying. No worries though, because I can replace it with one from one of my screw sets. And this is the magic of the flippy drive, a solderless connector that just plugs into this board, and the board goes on this mount. If your drive is broken or missing, you use this plug, and frankly it all just works. The board features an RP2 chip and an Expressif ESP32 Mini. I think the Raspberry Pi chip takes care of the booting, whilst the ESP chip does things like Bluetooth and wireless. If you manage to brick it, you can update it using the USB port. And this ribbon connector is for an optional Ethernet port. On the back is where we see the connector which connects to our GameCube. And naturally this is our SD card port. All in all, it looks like a nice package, and I love a nice package. So we're going to need to fold this solderless cable. Then we're going to need to mount the mount. We won't be using this because our drive works as we tested it, and I'll need to find some replacement screws. Luckily I have a set over there. And here they are. Hooray! This is the part which will make most people nervous. we need to fold the cable into a kind of a W shape. Whilst this isn't exactly a one-shot deal, it's hard not to feel like these cables are very fragile and about to break. But I did give it quite a bit of oomph and it didn't break at all. Let's see how well it fits inside the socket. It's actually not too difficult at all. It slips all the way to the bottom of the socket and you can feel it bottoming out on the bottoms of the folds we made. I said bottom quite a lot there, didn't I? It doesn't mean anything. From a top view we can see that it's fitted really well. We will need to deal with these parts that are sticking up though, so the back part needs to be folded down so that it's held down by the heatsink as per the instructions. Then our ribbon cable is in the correct orientation for when we route it to our mod board. We need to put it between these two posts. I'm guessing the other side of the ribbon also needs to be pushed down, so let's do that now. I am painfully aware there are loads of jokes I could be doing right now, but I'm not going near that. Must hold back! I also didn't put the shielding back in. As discussed, I didn't want to ruin the aesthetic of the new case. Let's pop the top shielding back on. We do need to replace this because it's where the disk drive itself rests. On some consoles, the shielding is aggressively folded so you don't have a gap, so feel free to widen your slot. Then your cable should slip in easily. Try not to pull it back and forward too much because you don't want to damage your unit. You also don't want your cable to fall out of your socket. With the top shield on but held on by gravity alone, I grabbed the disk drive. Now the disk drive has a plug that needs to go into this socket over the top of our solderless cable. This post here goes on this post and it's a really good guide to get your socket and plug together. You don't need much strength on this, it should just slide in nice and easily. And from the front we can see that that's mated perfectly. No gap? Happy days. And on the side we can see that our cable is ready to go into our mod, but first we need to put our mount on our console. There's usually 3 screws and one of them's hidden by the mount. Placing our mount in position we can see where the 2 screws go. One here and one here. And for completeness, the screw that we can't place back into the console is held safely in this hole on the mount. That's really clever, I like that. Right, with our screw preserved, we can mount our mount. A bit of epic screwing and we'll be ready to go. This is the first time that threads have been cut in this plastic, so it's quite difficult going. Obviously I've sped this up. Back at our mod board we need to flip up our cable retention latch. Pay attention here because you need to flip them up from the middle. If you try flipping them up from either end you will break the latch. A fingernail should do it. They really are quite weak though, so you need to avoid favouring either end as you apply any force. I thought this close-up might be helpful for you. Centre only please. Inside our socket are mating pins for this quite densely populated flat connector. The arrows need to point in the same direction on the board and the cable, and the board needs to be in as straight as possible. When you've got it in straight, flip the connector down in the middle and you should be done. That looks good to me. Now gently move it into position and we need to put our 2 original screws into place. These screws are actually slightly larger than the originals, not too much larger, but they'll do. They're just screwing into the Virgin 3D printed part, so the hole will become as big as it needs to accommodate their girth. And with our mod installed, we need to reconnect that panel that we repaired earlier. Without being able to connect my horrible third-party controller, we won't be able to do anything. The instructions say we need to hold the X button on our first boot. So, holding the X button, I power on the GameCube. Immediately I'm asked to set my language. Then, because the front panel's been disconnected, we're asked to set our system settings, including the date and time. I chose not to do it on this occasion, instead waiting to boot into the flippy drive setup. The ESP boots first, and from there it seems to bootstrap into setting up the rest of the system, which I've sped up here. Using this composite cable, the video output is frankly dog exhaust. But that's a problem that I can address later. Once the setup completes, we boot back into the language selection screen, and of course the console settings screen comes up. But we boot into QBoot, which is good news, and means it's time to put the rest of our console together. Of course, we need to disconnect the power first, and we'll need to disconnect the front panel yet again. We're going to replace this front panel as well. I need to deal with these dirty little sockets. Flipping it over, we can see that the board is held on by just 2 screws. Nintendo console designers really do seem to have a screwing fetish. There's screws in everything. With the screws removed, we can easily lift the board off. Flipping the board over, we can see our controller ports, and they're very grotty. There probably won't be a better opportunity than this to clean them. They're also quite full of dust, so I think we'll use the anti-static brush in order to dislodge as much of that dust as possible before dusting out the ports with a cotton swab. It's important to get out as much of this dust as possible before using contact cleaner, so I'm using my small bench vacuum as well. Now the contact cleaner has a fair chance of getting to the contacts and cleaning them up. I use another cotton swab in order to agitate the contacts. And after that, I think they're looking a lot better, if not perfect. We're going to place our acid yellow front on our board. Of course, it's just 2 screws. Once again, we'll be screwing into virgin plastic, so we need to take it nice and easy. Nice and tight, but not over tight, and ensuring this locating lug is in the right position. And with that done, I think the front panel looks a lot better, and I really hope you agree. Still looks like 2 smiley faces to me though. Let's deal with these front flaps. Now the flaps, as we saw earlier, just unclipped, so the new ones should just clip in. We've got these springs, so they need to go over these spring posts, and then it should just be a matter of holding the springs in position whilst we clip the doors onto the console. Okay, let's go for it. It's easier to have the doors flat to the front of the console. The moulded bar that clips into the slot actually has 2 movement limiting flags, and if you hold the flap horizontally, they can't actually go into the right position. So holding the door flat to the front of the console really is the only way to go. And after that, it's really rather easy to get the doors in position. Of course, we also gave the fan a bit of a clean. I'm not going mad on this at the moment because I really do think I'm going to need to revisit this console. I'm not really happy with the way that the shielding looks. And I'm aware, underneath the hot camera lights, that there's quite a bit of dust still all around the DVD drive itself. There's a bit of cheeky editing here as well because I forgot to put in the rear screw before I put this fan in. And I didn't want to make this video 5 minutes longer because of a mistake, so I did do a bit of re-editing. I've sped the rest of the assembly up. If you've taken a console apart, then you'll know where they go. If you had it delivered in a bag with some screws on a bit of sticky tape, then you might have had to do a bit more detective work. Speaking of which, before we put the front panel back on, we're going to have to see what we can do with these bent up earth contact spring things that we found in the bag. Sticky. I think what we'll do, we'll just try and straighten them out. I don't think we'll be able to see them much, so we'll pop them on and hope for the best. I'm not sure they have a tremendously important function. They may suppress RF noise and be a part of the RF compliance design of the console. I don't know. Let's pop on the front panel. Of course, first we'll need to replace that blooming ribbon cable. I'm starting to worry that it might be getting a bit worn. Once the ribbon cable is installed, there's 3 locating tabs down the bottom of the front panel, and they need to drop into the front of the bottom of the shell. Once they're in place, the 2 locking tabs should lock on the left and right posts at the front of the console. Although our one doesn't seem to want to lock all the way, it seems good enough and will be held on by the top of the console anyway. The back is a similar arrangement, but I have to say it goes on a bit more easily. And then after that, ignoring all that horrible dust that you can see under these filming lights, we're going to pop on the top of the console. Now it's best to open the lid, because if you don't, you could potentially damage the lid open switch. The lid argues a bit with me as we try to marry it to the bottom of the console, but after a while, I think we've simultaneously rescued this console and created the most eye-bleeding variant GameCube imaginable. Let's put some files on this SD card. Your SD card will probably come pre-formatted, and it's probably already formatted in exFAT, which is great. However, it's going to take a long time to copy things over to our SD card, so I'm going to make sure that I formatted it to exFAT and I do it in the default allocation size. We'll change the volume label here to Flippy Drive and we'll click Start, after which we can click OK, and in no time at all our drive will be formatted. Next I'll drag across some GameCube image files. I'm dragging them from my second screen where there's all sorts of naughty nautical things occurring, so if you can't see anything happening, that's why. Naturally, I'm speeding this right up. Nobody wants to sit and watch a file copy. The Flippy Drive supports ISO files or GCM files, but you have to append a .iso on the end of the files, at least for now. Otherwise it won't even look inside the file to read the information, or pass the information as they say. With our ISO files all copied and renamed, let's pop our SD card into the slot. And we'll rest the lid on the top for good measure, although to be honest we don't really need it at the moment. We'll also need our third-party junk troller plugged in, and woe is me, I'm afraid I don't have a GameCube memory card at the moment. I think that virtual memory cards are something that's been touted in the roadmap for Flippy Drive support. Don't quote me on that though. And here we are. It's been a long journey, and it's not one that's even over yet. From a plastic bag to punk as spec, I think this little GameCube deserves a bit of playtesting before we push on for its final glow up. And speaking of glow ups, it's amazing what a little UV light can do to lighten the mood. I know this GameCube isn't finished yet. I've not even screwed it together. It needs proper cleaning, and there's probably a part 2 in the works for this one. I also need a control pad that isn't terrible. I'm not going to test the DVD drive on video because I tested it off video and it works fine, and we saw that booting earlier. Instead, we're going to try to run some games off of the Flippy Drive. No matter what I do, I can't get the date and time settings to stick, so I think that the battery's probably dead on our control panel. Something else we need to do in another video. And the date and time settings don't stop us from getting to the games on the SD card. I tested every single disk image that we copied across, and they all worked apart from Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, something that I later fixed by downloading a different RIP. Now I know the irony of going for a Dreamcast game as my first game on testing this GameCube, but Ikaruga is just amazing, let's be honest. And it's amazing how terrible I am at this game. In Tate mode, which is the portrait orientation I guess you'd call it, it feels really small on this already small, cheap LCD screen. And playing Luigi's Mansion, just for a bit, also informed me that I need a better video connection. And perhaps a bigger screen. Because I know this game looks awesome. This is Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2. To me, this feels a bit like a spiritual successor of the arcade machine that so many of us loved back in our youth. Honestly, the visuals and the sound, they're just out of this world. And finally, I finished up with one of my all-time favourite GameCube games. It's WarioWare. A really bizarre little reaction game which I just love. I'm 50 years old and my reactions aren't what they used to be, but I still seem to be able to play this game quite well. I also love the aesthetics of WarioWare. It's amazing how many little Easter eggs and nods to previous Nintendo titles like Game & Watch, Zelda, etc. that have been crammed into this title. There's hundreds of minigames I think. Oops. Never mind. So, we took this GameCube out of a bag of bits and we've got it playing. Okay, it's not perfect and it's not up to the condition that I want it to be, but that's something we can approach in another video. I'd really like to know what you think of this project, so let me know below. The colour choice for the shell was just because it was cheap, but I think I actually like it now. What do you think? Would you go for a Taurine P yellow GameCube yourself? Thanks so much for watching, and thanks to my amazing patrons appearing on the screen right now. You can become a patron too and help support the channel at www.patreon.com/MarkFlexesStuff. Patrons get exclusive access to all of my videos in an ad-free format. Most of the time it's early. They also get access to the patron-only Discord. Patrons also achieve a state of zen. Like a strong reed, they bend in the turbulent wind. That might be a lie. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. If you count the shirts, you'll know how many days it probably took to shoot it. So please, go and watch another one of these videos. Go on, they're Gummy Bear approved, and at the end of the day, it costs you nought. Thank you, and goodbye.